All right, welcome to 8-4 part 3. Which is going to be using trig ratios. Okay, as we work today, if you would like to use, you can use one highlighter, or if you want to grab one colored pencil, I'm just going to use a yellow colored pencil because it's what I got laying here. So your choice. Today, as we do using trig ratios, first thing we need to do is remind ourselves of those trig ratios. So we have sine of theta, which sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, we have cosine of theta, so of the angle we're looking at. That's an O. I don't know why it looks like an A, but it did. Okay, so cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent. Now, that can be a lot to remember, and remembering which ones go with which. So to remember, we have a mnemonic device. And so we just think of these first letters. So for sine, we think so, the silent H. So not super helpful, but I don't know. So for sine, we have S. Is sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So sine opposite over hypotenuse. Then we have ca, C, A, H. Again, silent H. So C stands for cosine, and then A is our adjacent over H, our hypotenuse. So it just helps us remember which sides go with which ratio. And then tangent, we have TOA. Okay, TOA, T stands for the T in tangent. O is our opposite. A is our adjacent. Okay, so as we work today, I'm going to reference SOCA, TOA, because that's a little bit helpful with when we solve for things and we know which ones to use. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to find missing sides. We have 4 examples total today. You will need a calculator as you work. And you will need a glue-in. So first glue-in, you're going to get 2 glue-ins today. The first one is the one that has an X. So find that first one with an X. All right, go ahead and get that glued in. All right, so first thing we need to do is we are looking at our reference angle here, which remember our reference angle is this 35 degrees. Okay, that's really important that as we look at that, we're going to label these parts based on that. So I always start with my hypotenuse, that's across from the 90. So here's my hypotenuse. This would be my opposite, which means this is my adjacent. So I need to decide which one of these am I going to use, sine, cosine, or tangent with this angle based on our 2 sides we're given. Well, the 2 sides we're given is an opposite, an O, and a hypotenuse, an H. Okay, so OH tells us to use sine. That's the only one with both an O and an H. So we're going to use sine, so we'll say sine. And then the angle, so 35 degrees equals, and then we want our opposite over hypotenuse. So our opposite is 16, and our hypotenuse is x. And then we need to solve that for x, and we do it just like we did in chapter 7. So I'm going to start actually by putting this over 1. Remember, anytime we have something without anything, it's over 1. So then to solve it, we're going to actually flip it. So I'm going to put x over 16 equals 1 over sine of 35 degrees. And then to get x by itself, we undo a dividing by 16. So we multiply both sides by 16. Now this part, you don't know what sine of 35 is. Do not use just 35. It's a trig ratio that's specific to 90-degree triangles. And the ratio ends up being the same every time. So we want to use our calculator. Back in my mom's day, she had to use a table in the back of her book, her textbook, to help her do this. Okay, I've always had a calculator because I'm young. All right, so we do 1 divided by sine of 35. Now the degrees is right here. It's highlighted in DEG. So if you're using a different calculator, you want to make sure you're using degrees. That's something that the Google calculator doesn't do. So use decimals. Okay, times 16. And we get 27.89. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So I'm rounding either to 89 or to 90. Based on the next number is a 5. That tells me to round up. So I'm going to do 27.90. All right, and that's it. All right, so here we go with one more. Again, we always look at our angle first. So this time we have 30 degrees. I'm going to look at my sides based on that 30 degrees. So I like to start with my hypotenuse. That's across from the 90. Across from my angle is my opposite. And touching my angle is the adjacent. So if I look at the two sides with the parts, this one has nothing on it, so I'm not using hypotenuse this time. I have this x, which is my opposite, and I have this 13, which is my adjacent. So I have an O and an A. So I look back to my SOHCAHTOA, and I'm using an O, but I need an A also. So not this one, no H, O-A. That's tangent, T, TOA. So I'm going to say tangent of my angle, 30 degrees. Now it's OA, so O over A. SOHCAHTOA, O over A, opposite over adjacent. So my opposite was X, and my adjacent is 13. Now this time I don't have to flip it because my X is on top. I only have to flip it if X is on the bottom. With X on the top, I can just solve it. So to get rid of a dividing by 13, we're going to multiply by 13. And if we do it on one side, we have to do it on the other side. That undoes this 13 over here. So on the left side, I'm doing tangent of 30 degrees times 13. Again, we're going to use that calculator because that tangent of 30, we don't know that off the top of our head. Someday maybe you will get that on the top of your head, because that is a reference angle. It's a common angle that we use a lot. Okay, so tangent of 30 times 13 degrees. I'm going to zoom out here just for a moment so you can see that I typed in the whole thing. Okay, we get 7.50, so 50, but with that extra 5 at the end, that tells us to round up. So we're going to go with 7.51. All right, now we do have one more glue in and one more side. I'm going to be out of space here, so I'm going to go to my next page. On the next page, we're going to start by labeling this as missing angles. Okay, now remember, we always are working on to undo things. So to undo sine, we use the inverse of sine. Okay, to undo cosine, it's a weird S, I'm sorry, we're going to use the inverse of cosine. And surprisingly, just kidding. not surprisingly. We have tangent, and to undo tangent, we use inverse tangent. And this is just something that our calculator does again. It's not something we need to know how to do. We just need to know when to use it. And then our calculator will do the little mathy maths. Just kidding. It's all the same ratios no matter what the triangle is, because all right triangles, depending on, I don't know, it's all a thing. Okay, math. Okay. All right, and then just as a reminder, I'm going to write SOHCAHTOA at the top here. SOHCAHTOA. Don't know why I wrote H so far over. All right, you're going to glue in your second glue in. This one has the 2 and the 5 and the question mark and the angle. This time we are going to be finding the angle. So it'll look a little bit different. I find this part actually easier than the other part, but you might disagree with me. So let's see. All right, so as we take a look at this first one, we always take a look at that reference angle first. So our reference angle is here, it's this question mark. Okay, my hypotenuse is across from the 90. My opposite is across from the question mark. Remember, across means not touching. And then my adjacent is touching. So the two parts that I'm given this 2 and 5, 2 is my opposite, 5 is my adjacent. Okay, so if I have opposite and adjacent, when I look back at SOHCAHTOA, I need OA. So OA is my tangent. So I'm going to use tan. Don't ever say that, tangent. I always say tangent. Okay, so I'm going to do tangent, but now we don't know the angle. The angle always follows this trig ratio. So tangent of question mark equals, and then we want opposite over adjacent. Okay, so opposite is 2 over my adjacent, which is 5. Okay, now we would normally solve this, and to undo something, we have to do it to both sides. So to undo tangent, we have to do the inverse of tangent. So I'm going to do tangent inverse. If I do it on one side, I have to do it on the other side. Now when I do it on this side, it's actually going to pop up with parentheses, and I'm going to put 2/5 inside. So that's going to tell me my question mark equals, and that's when I use my calculator. Okay, to get to these, it's a little bit different. I'm going to zoom back in. Okay, to get to these, you can either do tangent, and then you can delete. You can go to this. You can hit the -1, and then go to parentheses, and it'll identify it as the inverse. Or if you hit func up here, func stands for function. Right here underneath tangent is tangent inverse. Okay, same one either way. Okay, so tangent inverse, and then in the parentheses, 2 divided by 5. Okay, we get 21.80. Again, when we round, we're either going to keep it at an 80 or round it to 81. After the 80 is a 1, so that tells us to stay. So 21.8. We can put 80 if you want, or just 8, and it's degrees. Okay, last one for today. Here's our angle. So we're going to label our sides based on that angle. I like to start with my hypotenuse. Now, as you look at this, you might be able to identify your 2 sides without even labeling all 3. Okay, until you can do that without having to label all 3 confidently, just label all 3. It takes 3 more seconds, unless you talk about it, like I am. Then it takes longer. Okay, so here's my hypotenuse. It's across from the 90. Opposite is not touching the question mark, so I don't want either of these touching the question mark. I'm going across. Here's my opposite. Adjacent is touching. So as I take a look at that, my 33 is the adjacent, and my other side labeled is 49, so that's my hypotenuse. So I'm looking for AH. So I go back up, I need AH. AH. This one, AH. This one is an A, but it doesn't have an H, so I need adjacent and hypotenuse. So that's my cosine. I don't know why I wrote H so far away, but I did. All right, so we're going to do cosine of our question mark. Angle comes after the cosine, and it's AH. So A over H. So A is 33 over my H, which is 49. Okay, then I need to solve it for my question mark. To undo cosine, we use cosine inverse. So if I do it on one side, do it on the other side. This side it's going to pop up with parentheses, and the parentheses is where I want to put that 33 over 49. Okay, on the left side that undoes the cosine, so I'm left just with question mark equals, and then I need to put that into my calculator. So again, to get to that cosine inverse, you hit this function button, inverse cosine, 30, and then you hit back to main to get to the numbers, 33 divided by 49. Okay, this time we get 47 and 66 hundredths. Again, we're rounding, so either we're going to keep it at 66 hundredths or 67 hundredths. After the 66 is a 4, so that tells me to stay. So 47 and 66 hundredths degrees. And that is it. There is a practice in Schoology. Your test is next Wednesday. See you later.